Well, again, it's my pleasure to welcome Michael Obi. Michael is the chairman and CEO of Spectrum Global Solutions. He helps companies succeed by improving performance and growing revenue through operational excellence. Spectrum invests in various business ventures that can be replicated across various markets in the US and internationally. In 2008, Michael successfully led his company to the purchase of the development rights for a Little Caesars Pizza in the Cleveland area, with a strategic plan to develop those stores in West Africa. He has also spent 17 years at the executive level in the banking industry. And on top of that, we are fortunate enough, Interrise is fortunate enough to work with Michael. He is our instructor in Cleveland, teaching through our partnership with the University Circle. And I think he's been teaching probably somewhere between 6 to 8 years already with us, and we really enjoy working with him year after year. So, Michael, thanks so much for being with us, and I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Brandon. Everybody can hear me okay?
We can.
Good? Thumbs up? All right. We're here to talk about access to capital. I'm so glad that we spent time yesterday doing forecasting and learning about your financials. So today, when we did this the last time, we were able to focus mostly on PPP and the idle loan. We're going to still do that today, but spend time towards the end talking about the forgiveness of the PPP. I had calls with some folks from Goldman Sachs and some of the CDFIs across the country yesterday, and it dawned on me that really PPP is a short-term strategy, to help people get back in workers off unemployment, but it's not a long-term lending or access to capital strategy. So after this pandemic, you still have to position your business for continuum of capital. So I want you to kind of wear your strategic hat to say, okay, what is the life after this pandemic? So this talk today is going to be circling around how do you go beyond COVID-19 as businesses are beginning to open up across the country, okay? So I just want to set the stage. I want to start with a small quote, again, to get our minds set to what we're going to discuss today. For us not to forget the basics of capital market and lending, don't forget the mindset of lenders. They have not forgotten, the environment is very nurturing now and very compassionate, with all this relief program. I don't want you entrepreneurs to get carried away. Once this pandemic is over, banks are going to go back to their traditional lending mindset, okay? Our objectives for today, we have 4 objectives. 1, again, to refresh us about mindset of the capital providers. Number 2, strategies for access to capital and your cash management during COVID-19 and after that. We're going to touch on various funding opportunities that are still available in your communities. And then finally, another objective is really how to continue to position yourself for what I call continuum of capital as you go through your growth cycle in your business, because business is a growth cycle. Okay, so let's get into the mindset of lenders. There are 4 of them that I kind of put in here. I seem to like number 4, but I try not to have more than 5 points on a particular topic, because after that, you probably will not remember it. But number 1 is anybody that gives you money expects something, they want something in return, okay? Even a grant, what they're calling grant, I like to use the term incentive. PPP, as an example, is a form of incentive. Government decide to give you some money so that you could create jobs, so you could return people back to work. An example of that is those that have seen the application for the forgiveness. So they gave you that money, a little carrot, but now to get that forgiven, there are about 12 pages of the forgiveness application, okay? So that's just a little bit of a reminder. The same way if a bank gives you money, they want that interest rate. You have to pay interest. There's some loan fees, and they have to make sure that you're managing your business the right way so you don't go into default. So there's always something in return a lender or someone providing capital expects from you. Number two, the mindset of a lender as you're interacting with your bank, they're always subliminal looking for your credibility. Do you have credibility? Do you have integrity? Is there credibility in the way you run your business? That's why it's so critical that we spent time yesterday on your numbers. Managing your numbers and having numbers that are really credible, it really is a test of their confidence in your business. Number three, demonstrate your ability to pay back the loan and keeping to your promise. For example, if you apply for the PPP loan, there are a lot of check marks to say that you're being honest and you're really going to return, keep to the promise that you are making. So you're certifying a lot of things. Loan documents is the same way. And even if it's a venture capital, they want to make sure that you promise to manage the business and put in the hours that you're going to do that. So anytime you're talking to anybody who's giving you capital, there's always a test of are you going to keep to your promise? And finally, the mindset of any bank is really about cash flow. Cash flow is an indication of whether you're going to pay back the money. Okay? No bank or lender will give you money if there's any doubt that you're not going to be able to pay that back. So that's why it's so important to watch your cash flow. They always say the best time to borrow money or get that line of credit is when your cash flow is strong. If your cash flow is weak, don't go to the bank. Just wait. Wait a little bit longer until your cash flow gets a little better on paper. Then you go and try to get that line of credit. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about SBA, the federal programs. The two federal programs that are out there today, to some degree, the EIDL loan, I think, is almost over. I think the money for the EIDL loan, if you haven't applied for EIDL loan, I think you need to focus on the PPP because EIDL loan, I think there was a cutoff. They're almost out of money on the EIDL loan. But the PPP, there's still a lot of money out there. Some money has been returned by the large players that took this money that they shouldn't have. And there was some, I think $60 billion that was dedicated to small community banks and CDFIs that are still available. So if anybody is having problem getting the application through, shoot an email or message to Brandon and we could get you connected with lenders in your local markets that have appetite for PPP. So there are a lot of banks now that are really aggressively, unlike the first round where you have to be chasing them down. So now they're really more aggressive to even take application for non-bank customers. So if you have not applied for a PPP, or if you've applied to a bank that is not being responsive, as long as you have not been approved, you can apply through another provider. If you are not receiving the speedy response that you deserve, you could apply to somebody else who is more nimble. As long as you cannot accept 2 PPP loans. Okay. The next, well, let's talk about comparison because the people get a little confused between EIDL loan and PPP. So let's put those side by side. Brandon also has a detailed comparison, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. As people have received this money, and make sure that you're spending it in the right bucket and doing your documentation. So if you look on the EIDL side, EIDL loan is meant to be a loan, long-term. It's a 30-year amortization loan. at 3.75%. Okay, so it's a very low cost capital that stretches for 30 years, which helps you with your cash flow. So I think that's a very attractive term. And also it gives you a little more flexibility to spend it on non-payroll stuff. So that's what IDO loan is for. And you're gonna receive this comparison by email, so you don't have to worry about writing anything down. But the big difference is the fixed debt. You cannot use PPP loan to make a loan payment, but an IDO loan you can. You may not be allowed to use it to pay off a long-term loan. You know, you can't use it to pay off a 5-year note. You could use it to catch up on your monthly payment or balloon payment, okay? You could use it to make some of the accounts payable invoices from your vendors that you would not use PPP for. So now let's turn to the right side of the screen and talk about PPP. PPP is predominantly about payroll. So 75% minimum of, it could be 90%, but 75% minimum has to be, for it to be forgiven, has to be spent on payroll. And you could use it on mortgage interest, not principal. You could use it to pay rent, utilities, and so on and so forth. But you cannot pay one person annual salary of over $100,000. So somebody making $150,000, if you divide that by 2 months, by 12 times 2 months, the salary has to be capped off at $100,000 on an annualized basis. Okay, then you can use it to pay separation pay, health care benefits that will count towards that payroll costs. Okay, those are the two differences. And then when we get to Q&A, if anybody has any question, we can get into that. So that's the federal program. There are a lot of things that are out there in the state. So you have to be checking your state governor's office. A lot of governors working with the legislatures are coming up with some programs to help small businesses in various communities. In the state of Ohio, one example of that is that we have a workers' comp insurance that is administered at a state level. It's a huge fund that the state, over the years, they've earned some return on the investment. They use our premium instead of Ohio to invest money in, like insurance companies would. So during this pandemic, the governor signed an executive order authorizing them to share those dividends with the small businesses in the state of Ohio. You know, in my pizza stores, we received about $5,000 that we didn't apply for. So you have to be checking what your state is doing. The reason I bring that up is, if I wasn't looking out for that, I may get an envelope in the mail from Bureau of Workers' Comp and thought, okay, this is a monthly bill. I paid them electronically. I may have thrown it away and not pay attention to that envelope. So you need to know what is going on in your state, so you could be anticipating to go through that mail. You don't throw it away, it's junk mail. You'll be surprised, checks that go uncashed in programs like this, because small businesses are not opening their mail and they're throwing things away thinking that is a junk mail. It may be a check in the mail. The same thing with the IDO loan advance. There are a lot of people that, you know, just when you open up your bank account one morning, you see that advance, right? That could be up to $10,000. Some people, maybe something happened with their bank account and SBA tried to deposit that money and they didn't, they had the wrong account number or something like that. So keep an eye on your state. The second bullet here that you see is be in touch with your SBDCs in your local market. They are usually the gatekeeper to a lot of programs that are coming through the state. Also, women business centers, and any other entrepreneur programs in your community. Make sure you're on the mailing list and make sure you look at their email and participate in some of the webinars so you can know what is available in your state level. Local communities, cities and counties receive some of this CARE Act. I know in Cleveland, the mayor authorized up to like $10,000 grant to some small businesses that are experiencing hard time that may not qualify for the PPP or EIDL loan, like barbershops, people that are 1099. So there are a lot of funding that we put together in Cleveland. In your communities, I know Detroit has some. So in your communities, you may have some programs from your city. So check with your city hall, economic development departments. Same thing with your county. We have something called Sustainability Fund through our county. The Cleveland Foundation donated about $500,000, and the fund came up to about $3 million. And we give out about $2,500 to $5,000 grants to small businesses in low to moderate income communities. So check your county government, check your city government, and see what they're offering to people like you. So take advantage of all the grants before we get into loans. Because, you know, it's really risky out there. You want to, taking a loan right now should be a last resort. Take advantage of the grants, and then let's see how things shake out before we start talking about taking a loan. Because when it's stormy and rainy outside, that's not a good time to go outside. You know, if you're in some kind of restaurant or food, you know, things that were shut down, we are not sure how this recovery, how long it's going to take. So I would not advise people to be quick take traditional loan at this time, unless you're in a growth industry. We do have some industries that are doing well. You know, if you're making any of this personal protection equipment, you're doing good right now. You know, if you are in some kind of food distribution, grocery stores, they're doing well. But that's just a few industries that are doing well. Okay, so let's go to post-pandemic. How do you begin to position yourself for the long haul? Number one is the PPP forgiveness. Begin to document everything you spend to make sure that you get that loan forgiven, because that's a lot of money that you don't have to pay back. So that should be your capital strategy. Number one is how to make sure you are paying attention to your bank, make sure you're paying attention to what SBA guideline continues to change. So everything I'm going to talk about today may change because they're constantly modifying the guidelines to make it more friendly and easier for small businesses. If you watch some of these hearings in the Senate, you know, the senators are asking the question of our administrators, like the Treasury, Secretary of Treasury, Mnuchin, and also Powell, Fed, to see what could they do more to make this process easier for small businesses. So as that is happening, expect the rules to continue to be flexible and be more friendly and more lenient for small businesses like you. Now, post-pandemic, the good news is that this stimulus may continue. There's prediction that unemployment will still be, by end of this year at least, will still be in the double digit, 10% or above, even at the end of the year by election time. So if that continues, expect that Congress will continue to look for ways to provide additional stimulus. The bad news is that the longer the pandemic, the less likely banks will be to lend money. So they're more likely going to tighten lending because bad economy means more risk. Banks don't want to make too much risk and making loans. That's why government is providing some of these programs, because they know by definition, banks will not make loans when it is shaky whether business is going to make it through this economic hard time. The fourth bullet here is you need to develop strategies. I think tomorrow session is about strategies. So you need to talk about find ways to convince your bank for continuing capital that you have an operating model that will survive the pandemic. If you're in an impacted industry like a restaurant, what is your strategy to survive if you have 50% capacity in your restaurant? Okay, so you gotta have a strategy, dust off that your growth plan and update it in the going forward section to say, this is how I'm going to survive, this is how I'm going to operate during and after this pandemic, because buying behavior will change. This pandemic has accelerated online purchases, but customers were already changing behavior before the pandemic. The pandemic now accelerated online purchases and transactions. So you got to look for ways to take advantage of the buying behavior shift. And then finally, you got to be able to tell your story quantitatively and qualitatively. So your forecasts, and then tell the stories about your strategy going forward. Okay, let's talk about the forgiveness. I pulled out a couple of bullet points regarding the forgiveness application. I emailed the full-blown application and the guidelines to Brandon, so he's going to mail that out to everybody. Now, I'm still learning this. I'm not an expert yet on this. Everybody's learning because this just came out this week from SBA. But there are a couple of things I want to just mention that people get panicked about around the 8 weeks. There was some confusion about, actually SBA modified that 8 weeks because there was information out there from the beginning that your 8 weeks starts from the date you receive the money. That has been modified to say the 8 weeks starts from the beginning of your next pay cycle after you get the money. Okay? So if your new pay cycle, when people clock in for a new payroll, starts on a Friday and you receive your money on Monday. So your 8 weeks will start on a Friday. Does that make sense? Yeah, not the day you got the money. So start with your next pay cycle. Okay, so that gave you some more time. The next thing that I'm researching, but I copied it exactly as it is on the SBA form that you're going to receive, is what they're calling FTE reduction safe harbor. And the way I'm interpreting this based on what is written here is also, let's say you are industry, you're not able to reopen right away to get your employees to work. I think there's a provision here that says if you could get to full employment by June 30th, although you've been closed since March 16th, as long as you have not opened your business by April 26th, your number of FTE has declined during this pandemic, and they define that during pandemic to be from February 15 to April 26. And you're able to return to full employment by June 30th. I think there may be a safe harbor exemption for you. So we are still researching this. I had a call before this one with some banks. They are not quite sure yet. This is where the lawyers come in and begin to interpret. So I suggest you check with your bank. Your bank is going to be the one to forgive this, to certify you as this loan being forgiven. So in summary, check with your business banker to see how you can be forgiven based on this safe harbor rule, because I see this as an opportunity for those that have not been able to get their employees back. Another way you could get this loan forgiven and not be penalized for number of employees. If you have if you have employees that you try to get back and you have to document, you write a letter to them asking them to come back to work, and they decline coming back, okay? And you could document that you've asked them to come back and they didn't come back, that position will not count against you. So there are many opportunities that is flexible if you're not able to get your full FTE back to work. Now, the worst case, let's say you've done everything you can and not all your money was spent on payroll as indicated. There's also an opportunity for you to now turn a portion, not all, of that money into a loan, okay? So it's not the end of the world. Some people are being stressed out and want to return the money. Don't do that. You know, if you don't spend the whole money in payroll, you can convert what is left over into a loan. Right now it's 24 months, but there's a discussion to extend that 2 years to longer term at a very low interest rate. So don't worry, don't lose sleep over it. You know, there's gonna be ways for you to convert that whatever doesn't qualify to a term loan. In closing, and then we'll open it up to questions, I have a few quotes here to help you all out going forward. During economic downturn, intentionally keep your eyes on new and emerging opportunities. Look for opportunities to pivot. And then another quote that I want to share with you, accumulate cash for strategic investment. I have purchased businesses in the last Great Recession for half of what it would have cost me to build a new location. I purchased a business for half the price because some people are getting exhausted. There are some people that want to get out. So to keep these businesses in your community, they're going to be looking for new buyers. So try as much as you can to accumulate cash and take advantage of some related businesses or new industry you may be interested in getting into. And then never be afraid to fail, okay? If this industry is not working, you know, if you've signed a $5,000 monthly rent when people were walking into your restaurant, and now you are 20, 50% capacity, and it's no longer working, it's okay to say, I'm not gonna make money and pay $5,000 a month in this storefront. Maybe I pivot and get somewhere where I'm producing food in a warehouse for half the rent and focus on online and delivery. So look for ways to pivot and cut your losses. So that is an opportunity. I know it's hard to say it in a pandemic, but there are some people that really been losing money, and pandemic will force them to really rethink their strategy and pivot into something else that'll be more profitable to them. So that's the end. Brandon, I'm going to turn over to you and we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Michael. I'm going to stop the recording.